The Philadelphia 76ers have now dropped to 2-9 at the start of the season and still have yet to get a look of the trio of Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid on the floor together. While we are still in the early stages of the season, is it time to begin hitting the panic button for if this team can even qualify for the playoffs? And I understand this whole game plan of load management, of making sure that you have the pieces in place and are making sure they're healthy at the right time, but there's one key part of that plan that we forgot. You have to qualify for the playoffs to make sure that is the case. Now, we are fresh off a 114-106 loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cleveland Cavaliers, undefeated on the season, advanced to 13-0 in tonight's performance. And as has unfortunately been the common case, no Joel Embiid, no Paul George, and no Tyrese Maxey for this game. We did get an update shortly before this, as of this morning, that the 76ers, Joel Embiid and Paul George, were ruled out against the Cavaliers tonight in the second game of a back-to-back. Left knee injury management for both. And while this is frustrating to me straight up, it makes it even worse when we see reports like this at the pregame presser from Nick Nurse saying, Nick Nurse said both Paul George and Joel Embiid responded well from last night and will play Friday in Orlando. George is off any minutes restriction moving forward, and Embiid is still ramping up from that standpoint. So if they responded well, I don't understand the concept of not having him on the floor, and this is for a slightly different conversation for each of these guys, right? For Paul George specifically here, we know he picked up a legitimate injury. We saw it right in front of our very eyes in preseason, the bone bruise, that he did work his way back from that. Now my critiques being, I don't understand why we're treated like he's coming back from an ACL tear, that he had a bone bruise, he missed like 2 weeks. Let the guy play basketball. Like, the fact that he was sitting out overtime against the Hornets is insane to me and something that I think is just bad across the board. There's no way that that would have increased his risk. If he's healthy enough to play, he's healthy enough to clock 5 extra minutes of overtime basketball. But that is the situation with Paul George. Hopefully we're in the clear now that the minutes restriction is lifted, but that was kind of my biggest critique there. For Tyrese Maxey, also a legitimate injury. That we all saw him grabbing that hamstring, and hamstrings are something that you do not want to mess with, especially with a player like Tyrese Maxey, whose game is so predicated on the quick stop and go, the change in direction, and the fast pace that he possesses. Most of the time, hamstrings are something that you nip it in the bud, let it get fully healthy, and it's never an issue again. However, there are guys that it is becomes like a career, I don't want to say ruining, but deterring injury, that they are repetitive issues, and that's exactly what you want to avoid with Tyrese Maxey. So I totally get taking care of him now, making sure he's completely rested up. There is no reason to push him, and for Maxey specifically, we know who he is as far as a model of consistency. And floor plenty. Shout out to Juan Soda as I flipped over to the Phillies Digest. Shout out to there. Before Tyrese Maxey, even this season, still doing his thing at over 27 points per game. He will look much better once we get the full picture together. I understand taking him off the floor right now. And then comes the conversation about Joel Embiid. So the frustrating part for this is I do have to separate this into the what, the why, and the how here, right? So we know the kind of, I guess we don't even really know the what. There has not been a clear cut for what the issue with Joel is. There has not been an announcement for a new injury, anything like that. Now, in my opinion, what the what is he's got degenerative knee issues that aren't going to get any better for the rest of his career, and they're managing this to the best possible extent. Is that a good thing? Absolutely not. Is it unfortunately the cards you're dealt that you got to work with? That's kind of where it is. Now, the why. It's obviously to get him healthy for the playoffs. What Joel deserves a lot of credit for throughout his career, more credit than he does get, is he is this absolute floor of a team. That if Joel Embiid is on a roster, regardless of who the other 4 starters are or the other 14 guys on that team, he's gonna make them a playoff team. That's just traditionally been the case, and even with him missing games, there's never been a doubt about the Sixers like making the playoffs from a year in and year out standpoint. But that's not going to be the case if he's logging 30 games, 25 games, 40 games, whatever the case may be. But the why here is very clearly to make sure that he gets there to the end of the playoffs, that he's healthy when the moment is largest. We have yet to see Joel Embiid have that signature playoff run, have one playoffs where he was completely healthy or playing like the best version of himself. And in Joel's defense a little bit here, for the most part, it's been weird things. It's been a facial fracture. It's been a torn ligament in his shooting thumb. He's broken his face twice, actually. The stomach pains where he was thrown up before games. It's been a lot of stuff sort of out of his control that while he's labeled as an injury-prone player, and that is fair because there are plenty that have occurred to him, it hasn't felt like to me that there are these like lack of fitness, lack of whatever. And as far as the fitness conversation, it's tough to stay in shape when you're hurt and not playing on the court. That this wouldn't be doing this guy any good when he's battling meniscus issues or a knee injury to be running suicides on a hardwood court from a night-and-night standpoint. So I do understand the why, even if I don't necessarily agree with the process of getting here. And that's what brings us to the how, which really is the issue here. the lack of transparency, the quote unquote plan they have in place that we don't know what it is. If there is a plan, which I have my doubts about at this point, just say it. Say he's not going to play back-to-backs. We're going to be incredibly calculated. His ramp-up period will be at the beginning part of the season because 6 months down the line, that's when the actual goal is for him to be playing his peak basketball and being his healthiest. That very well may be the case, and there is part of me that can understand that. But I need to hear that, and the Sixers have not laid that out. Daryl Morey has not faced the media. Joel Embiid only fairly recently has faced the media since he has returned to the court or wanted to get into an altercation with a reporter, whatever the case may be. And by the way, still side with Joel there. But the point being, this team, in order to reach their playoff aspirations, they have to make sure that they have a ticket to the dance, as I like to say. That you can't become homecoming king or homecoming queen if you're not even at the dance there. And for the Sixers team, we're talking about these standings that they are now sitting at 2-9, 14th in the Eastern Conference. It is still incredibly early in the season, but it's tough not to be discouraged by this. And when you watch the games on the floor, it's tough to squint your eyes and think about, is this actually a contender? We've yet to see any semblance of competent playoff level basketball, of a team that looks like they can compete against teams like the Boston Celtics, like the Milwaukee Bucks, who have been bad as well, Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. Yes, in theory, this team completely fits together, but are we going to have the time to actually see that grow? And the scary thought that is beginning to pop in the minds of all of us, it is this Brooklyn Nets team that played just 16 games together with James Harden, with Kevin Durant, and with Kyrie Irving. And while there's a heck of a lot more ego on that Brooklyn Nets roster than is the case with this trio, I do believe that there is a clearer fit with Tyrese Maxey, who is a more traditional guard, with Paul George, who is pretty much as traditional of a wing as can come, and Joel Embiid, who is still a big man in his heart. I do understand how that fits together a little bit more cohesively than was the case with that Brooklyn team. That I do think there was more of a need for those three players with a ball-dominant nature to learn to play off each other, figure out where each other want to be. But that doesn't mean there's zero need for this Sixers team. And to kind of what is the scale, I guess the balancing act here is, number one, to make sure you have a chance at the playoffs. And to kind of shift from my complete outlook here to provide a little bit of positivity on it, is to look back at these standings. It is more intimidating than it looks. That look at the East. The top, obviously, the Cavaliers, 13-0, who most recently took down the Sixers tonight. We saw that front and center. The Boston Celtics, we know who they are from a contender standpoint. The defending champs, who've looked very impressive in my eyes. And then a whole lot of mid in the Eastern Conference. That the Orlando Magic in third place with a 7-6 record. When looking at these standings overall, they are 6 games out of first, dropped down to 14th for the Sixers, who are 10 games out of fourth. So we're talking about this Sixers team being 4 games out of third place in the Eastern Conference. It does not take a hot streak or too crazy of an output for them to reach that, but the fact still needs to be that they do have to have that hot streak. So for this Sixers team, it's tough not to be discouraged by the start of the season. I fundamentally disagree with the way the Sixers are handling this, but I still do understand the why for how they're handling this. So is it the optics bad? Is it tough to look and think how this team can fit together? Absolutely. But I guess my conversation or my pushback on it would be, what is the more likely case for why the Sixers don't reach their playoff aspirations? Is it because they don't play enough regular season games and qualify for the playoffs, or is it because Joel Embiid and Paul George are not healthy when the moment matters most? The unfortunate reality of that is the answer is the second part of that. And while that's not an ideal stance from the standpoint of you've invested max contract and millions upon millions of dollars in each one of these guys, yeah, it's a concern there. But the reality is there's such a finite number of basketball players who can play at the peak of these two. And most specifically, I'm speaking about Joel Embiid here, that when he is at his best, he's still the best basketball player in the world. That there's a level of two-way dominance that he can reach that maybe Giannis is the only other player that I throw in their category when they're at their best. And this is not to diminish the guys like Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Steph Curry. They all can each take over games, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, in their own unique ways. But there is this, I will not lose ability when Joel Embiid is on, that you just kind of keep signing up and hope you can get that. Joel can win a championship if he plays his best basketball, but we've yet to see him have a chance to do that when the lights have been the brightest. So for this Sixers team, they're seeing it through. They're trusting the process. They're sticking to the game plan. However long this ramp-up period is, it better be worth it at the end. I have not loved how the season has gone by any means. It's impossible not to be absolutely frustrated by the product on the floor and for the Sixers team. And I do shout out to Kyle Neubeck of PHLY Sports, did tweet this out, which did bring me a little bit of a chuckle, who says, the frustration I'm seeing today at the Sixers' adherence to the long-term plan for Embiid and PG's health is good proof that the just wake me up when the playoffs start is and always has been pure coping. Regular season still matters a lot, whether you can admit it or not. Now, I do agree with his point over here that I don't think he can make any of us happy from a full-term perspective, how the Sixers go about it. There is no ideal way for Joel Embiid to, play the same level as a guy who is capable of playing every day. He is not Mikal Bridges. He's not an Iron Man that's going to be there. That's just the reality. Human beings are not made to be 7'2" and 300 pounds the way Joel Embiid naturally stands here. But you only got a couple more chances of this. The reality is he's 30 years old. If this season ends up a lost cause for one reason or another, that he never gets fully healthy, he's never able to ramp up, or the Sixers team are not able to stay afloat enough without it, do you feel better about running it back next year? Do you feel better the year after when he's getting 32 and 33? And by the way, his sidekick, Paul George, has a fairly extensive injury history, who's 35 right now. And yes, it's nice to have the spark of life from Jared McCain. For Tyrese Maxey to just be 24, still growing and getting better. But this is about Joel Embiid. And if he's not there for one reason or another, this all is a failure. The process would be a failure. Now, I'm not ready to get there yet, but it is tough not to be to an extent. I understand those of you who are. So we'll see how things go from here, but I do think the pressure cooker of this Sixers season is just about to heat up. Could there be a stretch where they win 17 of their next 20 and all of a sudden we're talking about they look like the best team in basketball? Absolutely. But what is the over-under you would set for how many games we actually see these three on the floor together? Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid. That is the look at it and can see the championship contender. But we have not seen that yet. I think my number and my guess for that, I probably put around 30 games. Now, is that enough to build enough chemistry to contend? That is to be determined. These are all questions that we do not have the answer to yet, but the Sixers are playing a dangerous game the way they are walking into this season. We will see what happens from there, and appreciate each and one of you guys tuning into this video. As always, want as many of you along as possible for this Sixers season. We are through our ramp-up process here, so we're locked in and ready to go. Appreciate each and one of you guys tuning in. Make sure you smash that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.